Hello, volunteers.
Hi volunteers. This video is all about how you as the on-the-ground volunteers will be going out into the real world and adding info using your mobile phones on the streets.
Now watch carefully because there's a bit to take in. But don't worry because there's a training booklet to refer to on this page.
When you go to the on-the-ground challenge page, you see a series of cards, all inviting you to do one of two things. Firstly, your challenge card may be asking you to update info already on the main WheelEasy map with more helpful descriptions and better photos. For example, this card asks you to update all the places currently on our main map in Circular Quay, an area which might have changed substantially since COVID, by concentrating on this shaded area. When you click on an icon, you can then rate the accessibility, provide more access detail, or take a photo. Alternatively, you can go to the full listing itself and edit it from there. Or, if you come across a place which doesn't have an icon on the shaded map, you can also just add it directly. Secondly, your challenge card might be to focus on adding new places to an area we've decided to concentrate on. You can do this either by completing info on these grey pins on the map, which have been suggested by online volunteers already, or directly by adding a place which hasn't yet been suggested and therefore isn't indicated on the map. Some cards ask you to concentrate on specific tasks. For example, these ones urge people to take just photos of all the places we currently have listed in Bondi and Manly. If you don't see a card for an area which you can contribute to, you can choose Add and Update Places Near You. This shows a map around your location, together with any places or suggestions already on our maps. With all places on all the cards, please take the time to add as much access detail as you can. Some details may have been uncovered by the online volunteers during their computer research, but you, being there on the ground, will usually have a much clearer appreciation of access details. And also, being there on the ground, you can take relevant photos, which will also be incredibly helpful. Useful access info is so hard to come by, and people with mobility needs and those with them will be so grateful to have lots of helpful info all in one place. The next part of this film shows you what kinds of things to look for when you're at a particular place. Firstly, indoor categories. Normally with buildings, people will need to get into. Commercial businesses like cafes or restaurants or hotels, or entertainment venues like museums and cinemas, or large venues, shopping centres and zoos. There is one really crucial first question. How easy is access? The most obvious thing to look for is whether there is flat access, maybe straight in the front entrance, or maybe there is a side entrance that isn't immediately obvious. For example, this cafe has a side entrance, unsignposted and completely tucked away out of sight. You probably wouldn't even know about it unless you asked. And this one is a bit better, but you might still miss it. This hotel doesn't at first look accessible until you learn there's a long ramp hidden out of view. And often there may be large communal ramps designed into the built environment that make whole areas of individual places accessible. And some places do have really helpful signs which point out the alternative flat access way in. So don't always assume that the stepped way in is the only way in. It's also worth asking staff about things like portable ramps. This restaurant looks inaccessible to some people until you find out that they have a portable ramp. And it's also worth noting the approach to the entrance. This place is situated on a really tricky hill. Keep an eye out for other things which might be really helpful for some people, like these automatic front doors. Inside venues there might be lifts, or often you might find a special wheelchair lift. This one makes the split level bar accessible in this hotel. In bars or restaurants, have a look at the type of seating. Fixed benches or high stools will make life for wheelchair users pretty lonely and difficult to eat from. Another thing about indoor seating is that often, if a place is crowded, most tables might not be easy to get to. Sometimes the easiest option for people will be to sit outside. Outside space is usually fairly easy to see, but sometimes it might be hidden away at the back. When it comes to hotels, see if there's an accessible room. A truly accessible room will have plenty of space around the bed and usually a bigger bathroom with a roll-in shower. The other type of place where you will need to ask particular questions is at cinemas and theatres. Ask the staff if you can see any special seating arrangements. There are nearly always wheelchair spaces wherever there are large audiences. The other things to look for in all these types of places is the toilet facilities and the parking. An accessible toilet is the most important thing. If you can't go for a pee, your day might be easily ruined. With places that have their own facilities, accessible toilets should be at least 3 times the size of most cubicles. If they're smaller than that, they will be very difficult to manoeuvre a wheelchair in. Some, though, are enormous. Look for extra things like automatic doors, hoists, change tables, or even showers. Some places share accessible toilets, particularly restaurants and cafes nearby to each other or outlets in food courts. Such facilities might be accessed with a special key, which you might need to get from the outlet itself. With parking, is there any special accessible parking? And how easy is it? Is there a drop curb nearby? Keep an eye out for things like awkwardly placed signage or obstacles or plants that might make getting in and out of your car difficult or even impossible. And if there isn't any parking on premises, do the staff know of any alternative parking nearby? So that is what to look for with indoor venues. Moving on to public accessible utilities like parking, toilets and lifts. Most lift entrances are wide enough, but as with everything, photos will usually tell the best story, so please do add them. The same with accessible public parking bays. Please try to take photos of the bays themselves, as well as nearby signs and drop curbs. With accessible public toilets, most should all be large enough, but it's always worth taking photos as well. Moving on now to mainly outdoor spaces, principally those open to any members of the public like parks or playgrounds or picnic areas or lookouts or beaches. How easy is it to enjoy the space? Do any park entrances have steps only? Is the terrain smooth and flat or hilly? Or in this playground, is it easy enough to get to the main play areas? Or to the view at this lookout? Again, please always look for accessible toilets and accessible parking, and look for them at beaches too. And at beaches, apart from ways onto the beach, such as ramps, describe the gradient. Is it steep or slightly more gentle? And the sand consistency. Is it fine and powdery, making it very hard for a wheelchair user or someone with mobility issues? Or is it generally firmer and a bit more compact? Also, if you can, ask about the availability of beach wheelchairs or special beach matting. Our final outdoor category is strolls. People who have difficulty getting around or finding things to do on a day out with their family often really appreciate going for strolls. They are mostly flat, well-paved pathways that are often through bushland or by water, a beach, harbourside or lake. If you're adding one of these, pay particular attention to any difficult terrain or inclines or any particular obstacles. Lastly, there are 3 categories all related to transport: train and tram stations, boat terminals, and airports. Take photos of the principal method of access, with train stations, the ramp or lift to the station, and the portable boarding ramp for the train. For boat terminals, accessibility is usually determined by whether or not the terminal has a floating pontoon, which rises with the level of the tide. Main airports are all accessible. However, it's always worth noting how far distances from check-in to plane are and whether boarding is by air bridge or from ground level. Again, please always look for accessible toilets and accessible parking. So hopefully that gives you an idea about the things you should be looking for when you add a place. And the better your entry reads, the more helpful it's likely to be. Remember that pictures paint 1,000 words, and it'll be your photos as much as the quality of your descriptions that will also make a difference. You'll see that you can add captions to your photos, and often a caption can make so much more sense of a photo, and it'll be an opportunity to include really helpful info. This photo here is so much more noticeable and makes much more sense with the inclusion of a caption. The final thing to say is that while it may seem that there's a lot to take in here for each category, it is made so much easier by our What to Look For films when you are adding a place. In the flow for the category you're adding, you'll see the option to look at a 60 to 90 second video, and this explains the things to look out for that category in a bit more detail than we've outlined in this video.
One last thing. Don't automatically ignore inaccessible places, because it's often as important to know what you can't use as much as what you can. Thanks again for your help, and good luck.